Hello, and Shabbat Shalom. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Tzav, and as you see the first source on the source sheet, we are introduced to the prohibition of pigul. And pigul, as presented in the Torah, seems to be something that happens to a korban, a sacrifice that is not eaten in the right time. Okay, it says Leviticus 7, starting at verse 16. If, however, the sacrifice he offers is a neder or nedava, which is a votive or free will offering, it shall be eaten on the day that he offers his sacrifice, and what is left of it shall be eaten on the morrow, meaning you have the day and then the next day. What is then left of the meat of the sacrifice shall be consumed in fire on the third day. If any of the flesh of his sacrifice, if it's eaten on that third day, it shall not be acceptable. It shall not count for him who offer it. It is an offensive thing. Pigul yihiyeh v'nefesh ochel mimenu avonat tisa. And if you eat that pigul, that is, shall bear his guilt. Okay, it's a serious sin to eat pigul. Rashbam seems to point out what I think plain sense reading of these psukim are, is that pigul is a prohibition of eating old sacrificial meat. Okay, you don't eat it when it's supposed to be eaten. It gets old. It's now the third day. The sacrifice becomes pigul. That's not, however, how the Chachamim, how our sages understood this verse. That's not what the Torah Sheba'al Peh, that's not what the oral Torah teaches. And Rashbam is very explicit that Chachamim akruhu mipshuto, that the Chachamim overturned the plain sense meaning, that at the time where one of the most significant actions of preparing and offering the sacrifice was being done, the one who did it had the intention that he was going to eat it at the wrong time. Okay, when he slaughtered the animal, when he carried the blood, when he received the blood into the vessel, or when he sprinkled it onto the altar. Okay, all of these are the core avodot, the four core acts of service for a korban. And if you have the wrong intention, I'm going to eat this too late, I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to be doing, that turns the sacrifice into pigul. Rashi, again, is very, doesn't have that problem. He says, no. Rashi is telling us, bringing us the Torah Sheba'al Peh perspective, that if you have the intention to do the wrong thing, that's actually what renders something pigul. As frequently, Rav Amnon Bazak is one of my major guides in understanding Parshanut and Torah commentary, and he suggests, and there have been many others who've kind of recognized this as well, and who studied the Chazal's, the rabbis' approach to korbanot, that this move from the prohibition being eating it too late towards thinking that one is eating it too late is actually consistent with a broader ethos towards the sacrifices, where we move away from the mistaken understanding that it's about what one does, one's actions, this service with, of just killing animals and offering them on this back, to really about having the appropriate intentions and the mindset and being in that space of serving God with appropriate intentions throughout all of the stages of the korban. This is how our tradition understands the korbanot, not about the actions, but about one's thoughts, and that they should be appropriate. I have on the source sheet a link to the Shabbat HaGadol shiur that I was really happy that so many of you were able to join live on Zoom last night. You have a recording of the Zoom session and the source sheet linked here right now. And I just want to point out how this idea that we're concerned about, that intention matters so much. I think that's a theme that is quite relevant for maybe every day, but certainly for these days right now. First of all, the acts of Passover are about inculcating in ourselves a certain space of feeling free and remembering our own freedom and feeling as though we left Egypt. And so all of the rituals that are perhaps more challenging to follow this year are not are important, of course, but not the focus. The focus is about using those rituals to create a certain headspace, a certain way of feeling, a certain way of thinking. And we saw in the Shabbat HaGadol shiur that the Torah has at least two paradigms for what the Korban Pesach, the original Paschal sacrifice, was about. The Korban Pesach is described in the book of Exodus as we gathered in our homes the night before leaving Egypt and thought about and ate the Paschal sacrifice with blood on our doorposts as a plague raged outside, and we huddled in terror, preparing to go free the next day. And then there's the Korban Pesach as described in the book of Deuteronomy, where there's no blood on the door, where this is a sacrifice brought in the temple and eaten at home, but there's no blood on the door whatsoever. And the doorpost is a very important place in Judaism, in the Torah. There are several instances where doorposts are important, and we see a shift from the book of Exodus to Sefer Dvarim in the use of doorposts. In Sefer Shemot, in the book of Exodus, when again, the Korban Pesach is described, blood goes on the door. In Sefer Dvarim, when the Korban Pesach is described, there's no blood on the door. In contrast, whenever the mitzvah of tefillin is described in Sefer Shemot, it's just described on its own. It's a mitzvah for one's hands and one's head. And when in Sefer Dvarim, the mitzvah of tefillin are described, they're described always in the context of mezuzah. And so that's how the doorpost gets brought and taught in Sefer Dvarim. It's a place of putting not blood, but a place of putting a mezuzah. And a mezuzah, I believe, is really the opposite of blood on the door. Blood on the door is about carrying in fear as we depend on God's protection. And the mezuzah is about writing something ourselves, placing it on the door so that we see it and we remember that God is one, and we should have God in our thoughts as we come in and out of our homes. And in some ways, it's really the opposite, okay? It's a real shift in consciousness. And I think that's what I want to kind of leave all of us with as we go into Pesach this year, that even though there are some similarities in many ways to that original Pesach that we celebrated in Egypt, scared in our homes as there's danger outside, I actually think that the dynamic is quite different this year. We're not waiting for God passively to protect us. We are in our homes in isolation as an act of responsibility towards others. We've been taught all that we need to know by God how to prioritize life and protecting health. And our isolation is not a passive isolation to avoid the plague raging outside. It's an act of active choice that we are taking responsibility for others by isolating ourselves in order to protect life and to protect health, which is exactly what the mezuzah is supposed to inculcate. It's not blood on our doors. We have a mezuzah on our door. We see the mezuzah, we know what God's priorities are, and then we can actualize those priorities in the world this year by being in isolation, and please God, in future years at very, very crowded Seder tables with multi-generations and many, many guests sitting together. Have a wonderful, wonderful Shabbat. I can't wait to be able to celebrate Shabbat with you, and look forward to hearing from you in the coming days. Take care.